So one of the really challenging problem in a startup is probably finding the right co-founder. Yeah. And even though we can have like a vibe check whether we are really connecting with this person or not, it's probably a good idea to have like a some sort of framework through which we can kind of assess whether it's a good partnership or not, right? And in the past I read this book, The Ideal Team Player, and I really like the framework they gave to assess whether this person you are working with and also you yourself is an ideal, like where do you fit in terms of being an ideal team player, right, or an ideal collaborator. And what book suggests is you need to check three qualities in yourself, also in your co-founder, right? And based on that assess whether this is a good partnership or not, right? So the first quality is how humble you are, or how humble is the other person is, right? And of course it's like in a spectrum. Of course nobody is completely arrogant and nobody is completely humble, but where do you fall, or where is your co-founder fall in terms of this humbleness, right? If you're dealing with a person who is very self obsessed or very arrogant, it's not going to be a very fun ride, right? It's, even though the other person might be very smart, right, but it's not going to be a very pleasant experience to work with that person, right? So the first thing you need to see, like you need to have some sense how humble this person is. And interestingly, this is something which comes up so easily, right? I mean, just within a one conversation you have like a pretty good sense where does this person stands in terms of being super arrogant to super humble, right? So that's the first quality. The second quality is how hungry this person is, or how driven is this person, how much he really wants to do this, right? And this is the interesting one, because in my past I met so many people who are super smart, but there is no strong drive, right? There isn't really very strong desire to build a company or anything like this, right? And it's very kind of frustrating in some sense. Like if you're working with somebody and the other person is kind of not really doing anything, it doesn't want to do anything, right? Even though they are completely capable of doing it, right? So that's the second quality, how hungry this or how driven this person is. And the third quality is how much people smart this person is, right? How much EQ uh, the person has, how well he can read the social situations, right? So that's the third quality, right? And the book suggests basically that you need to profile yourself and co-founder, anybody you're working with, where do you and the other person stand in this uh, three-dimensional quality check, right? And interestingly, let's say if you notice that it's very easy to predict a certain behavior if you see certain qualities in a certain amount, right? For example, if somebody is very arrogant, not humble at all, and is something very hungry, that person would likely act as a bulldozer, right? He will just run through you, run through everybody else, right? Without caring for anybody else feeling or anything like that. If somebody is very people smart and somebody is very driven but not humble at all, would likely act as a politician, right? And the same way you can see the different combinations and how the person is most likely going to act out of, right? So it gives a, like a very nice framework. I would highly recommend to read the book, very small book though, to give some sense check, like the kind of person you are working with and would you enjoy working with this person in a long haul, right? So that's like a one check, having some sense of understanding of the profile of the other person based on these three qualities, right? The second aspect is the capability or the competency in terms of the whatever the other person is bringing on the table, and the aptitude, right? So that's more like your skills, how capable this person is, and of course how capable you are, right? And this gives us the sense of what kind of problem you can attempt together, right? So you need to know like how exactly how capable somebody is in certain tasks, right? Of course, in the startup, you are responsible for certain things, and your co-founder is going to be responsible for other things. And you need to have some sense check, like how much capability or how much competency he has in terms of that particular skills. Of course, you can learn most of the things on the job, but you also need to have a sense check how much you're already kind of bringing on the table, right? And the second thing is like a little bit more complicated, right? A little bit more biologically, right? Certain people are more smarter than other people. Just like the certain people has a bigger height and some people has lower height, right? And you can't really do something about it. And person who has a very high IQ or very high aptitude is going to be somebody who is going to be able to solve a lot of problem relatively easily, right? Or going to be able to solve much more complex problems relatively easily, right? And I've seen this a lot in my past, right? I would like to believe that you can substitute with hard work pretty much everything, but unfortunately that's how the reality is, right? Some people are just more smarter than other people, and they're going to be able to solve more complex problem given that they are more driven and going to win a competitive game if it is a startup game, right? So with that kind of a understanding, right, how well you can work together in terms of these qualities and what level of intelligence or smartness and competency you have, you can select the right kind of problems to solve, right? If I see myself, I'm an engineer, right? And given that the level of IQ I have and the level of competency I have, I know I can build certain sort of things, but if I ask myself, can I really build an algorithm which will optimize the LLM? Chances are I will not be able to, right? Something like a very advanced mathematics is probably not going to be within my circle of intelligence, right? Based on my past experiences, right? But there are different problems on the different level of uh, with the different capability of people can attempt, right? But you need to know like where do you fit and what kind of problem you can actually solve, and what kind of problem of course your co-founder can also solve, right? So based on these two things, right, you can have like a pretty good sense how well you're going to be working together and what kind of problems you guys can solve together, right? Then the question become, do you really need a co-founder? Do you really want a co-founder? Especially if you're a builder, right? Probably you can build yourself, probably you can try to sell yourself and all these things, right? Do you really need a co-founder? My experience so far has been is having a co-founder with whom you have a healthy relationship would make the whole journey a lot more fun as compared to if you're trying to do it on your own. Another aspect is if you plan to raise money or anything, it's very unlikely you're going to be able to raise it without a co-founder, right? On the other hand, having a co-founder would likely slow you down in the beginning, right? There is a saying that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right? Very true, right? So in the beginning, of course, it's going to slow you down because you have to do a lot of communication, right? You have to get yourself in and the other person in sync, right? And two people have like a very two different worldviews. Obviously, you're going to have to resolve a lot of conflicts, right? Again, two people, two different views, and you need to kind of go back and forth and get kind of come back to a common understanding, right? But in my opinion, having a co-founder is probably a better setting, right? Just that there's so many things to do within a startup. If somebody is there and kind of bringing helping in terms of or like doing this thing together, there's a lot of help especially in the beginning, right? And this just having a shared journey with someone has a lot of value. Yeah.